Hi everybody, today we're starting chapter 11, which is our chapter regarding epidemiology as well as public health. In this particular presentation, we're going to discuss what epidemiology is. We'll discuss interactions that exist between pathogens and hosts as well as the environment. We'll talk about chain of infection and how infection is the most plausible to occur. Different causes of infections, different reservoirs, which are essentially giant databases where a lot of pathogens can harbor. We'll talk about how disease is transmitted, primarily through the transmission of pathogens such as microorganisms, viruses, and as well as bacteria, protists and fungi, all those fun organisms that we've talked about up to this point in the course. We'll also discuss, or at least talk about, the roles of different public health agencies, and then we'll talk about my favorite topic, which is bioterrorism and biological warfare, which is what my background is in. And then we'll talk about water supplies and sewage disposal, essentially the sanitation system, and why that's pretty crucial in minimizing the spread or transmission of pathogens. So let's begin talking about epidemiology. Epidemiology is essentially the study of diseases within a population. So when we talk about epidemiology, we're talking about how we watch and observe how disease that is brought on by either bacteria, fungus, protists, different parasites, insects as well. We're talking about, or at least observing, how pathogens are spread through the population. So you have a number of individuals that work at the Center for Disease Control, who are epidemiologists. You also have a number of individuals who work at the local and state health departments who are considered epidemiologists. And what these individuals do is they monitor different populations throughout their assigned regions. So if you look at this picture of South Carolina, to put this in perspective for you, we have numerous regions that are monitored by a large number of individuals. And what those individuals are responsible for is they're responsible for going to different clinics, different hospitals, different primary care physicians, and trying to collect data on what types of symptoms have been observed in the population over a certain period of time. And so epidemiologists study that flow of data, and their job is to go out and basically survey or conduct what we call biosurveillance, where we monitor to see what diseases are being prevalent in certain regions. And then in doing this, what you do is you look for trends in the data. And so trends in the data will tell you whether or not there's a large outbreak of malaria or Ebola. There's some of the not as probable outbreaks that we are very worrisome about. But right now, the Zika virus is the big virus that's being monitored. And so epidemiologists are working very hard to look to see where these incidences of disease outbreaks are taking place, and hoping to find the origins of these disease outbreaks and implement control mechanisms that will help to reduce spreading or infection among patients. So epidemiologists study a variety of factors that's used to evaluate and assess how frequent a outbreak might be, or a particular pathogen in a population, or a particular infection, or a particular type of symptom that's being observed. Epidemiologists also look for distribution of disease throughout the population, as well as any possible signs that a certain disease might lead to an outbreak. So epidemiologists play a very important role in monitoring and controlling the spread of infectious diseases. So in doing so, they hopefully can protect our populations through more control mechanisms, hopefully eradicate diseases, or at least stop them before they become too deadly. Okay, so that's just the role of epidemiologists and what epidemiology is, which is essentially the study of disease within a population. So some terminology that we're going to talk about that you should be familiar with are going to be things like morbidity rate, incidence, prevalence, point of prevalence, contagious disease, communicable disease, as well as zoonotic disease. I'm sure you've heard these terms before, but let's go ahead and define them. A communicable disease is an infectious disease that is simply transferred from one patient to another. So it's communicable because you can essentially come into contact with it through socialization with another person. Contagious disease is also an infectious disease, and it is a type of communicable disease. And this contagious disease is much more easily spread from person to person. So with something that's contagious, you get it immediately. Something that's communicable, this can be kind of hit or miss. So you have an infectious disease that's being transmitted from one person to the other, but maybe it's not highly contagious, it's just communicable because a person's able to transmit it to another person. A contagious disease is when you have a communicable disease that's highly and easily transmitted from person to person. So the key difference is the ease of the transmission between the infected patient and then the non-infected patient. A zoonotic disease is a disease that individuals or patients acquire from animals. Something like Salmonella can be considered a zoonotic disease. If somebody's infected with Salmonella and they have gastrointestinal complications, a lot of times it could be a little kid that maybe picked up a turtle, and the kid didn't wash his hands, so they put their hands in their mouth because that's what kids do, and that caused the kid to become very sick. And so that's an example of a zoonotic disease. Excuse me. Another example is that of the Zika virus. The Zika virus is being transmitted by mosquitoes right now, and because it's coming from, the origins are coming from an animal, we refer to that as a zoonotic disease. Incidence and morbidity rates are two terms that are used pretty much all the time by epidemiologists and in our studies when learning about public health. With incidence, we're talking about events of a particular disease. The incidence is the number of new cases of a disease in a defined population during a specific time. So to figure out incidence, what you do is you have to select a region. So let's go back to our South Carolina map. So say like region 2, and say we're looking for, again, Zika virus incidences. So you would limit your observations to just region 2. And then you also want to look at a specific time period. So if I'm observing patient data in region 2, and I would limit it to, say, the last 2 months, you tally the number of Zika cases that arise, and that's going to be your incidence number. So that's what I mean by incidence, is the number of new cases of a disease in a defined population during a specific time period. Okay, so just incidence. The morbidity rate is going to be the number of new cases of a particular disease that occurred during a specific time period for a specifically defined population. So for morbidity rate, you again, very similar to incident rate, you're going to define the population, so say region 2, okay? We also will want to have a specified time period. And so let's say that's going to be, again, the last 2 months. And then what you want to see is the number of new cases of a particular disease that occurred during that time period. So you're looking for the existence of new cases of a particular disease. So that's the difference between incidence and morbidity rates. With the study of infectious diseases, we look at incidence, we look at morbidity rate, and then we also look at how things are transmitted. And there's a variety of factors that are involved that epidemiologists have to consider and microbiologists have to consider. The entire health industry, public health industry has to consider in terms of helping to control and manage the spread of infectious diseases. Anytime you interact with somebody, depending on how close they are to you, you could easily be transmitting some sort of pathogen to them. So when we sneeze, we have all of this yucky stuff that just goes out into the air. And it really is by chance that a virus or a bacterial agent or even a fungal agent resides in the air, and when it's expelled from a patient or from patient 0, it needs to come into contact with whoever the next infected person is going to be. So all of that happens by chance. There are some organisms out there that are a lot more contagious than others. There's some viruses out there that are more contagious than others. But chance does play a role and a factor into transmission of infectious diseases. Contact with animals. Humans have pretty continuous contact with animals. Most people are a good number of the population has a pet, and your pets play outside. Your pets are animals, and they can harbor parasites such as fleas or ticks. So zoonotic transmission can occur in a variety of ways. You could have a little kid that's just out playing outside, and kids are definitely more prone to spreading infectious diseases than adults are because of their hygiene habits. Kids play outside, kids don't wash their hands all the time, kids put their hands in their mouth, they are constantly touching things, and all these inanimate objects or animals that children come into contact with can easily cause this child to pick up an infectious agent. And the reason for this is not only because of their immature hygiene habits, but it's also because they're still developing immunities. So our immune systems as adults are presumably a lot stronger than a kid's immune system, which is still growing and maturing. And because of that, it makes the child more susceptible to acquiring diseases. Now, the more interactive a child is early on in life with the elements outside, the more likely they are to develop very strong immunities to being more tolerable of infectious agents when they get older. So in this picture here, we're looking at kind of the transmission of worms that could be acquired in this little kid. So say outside you've got a dog and you have cats. There's fecal material that gets released from these guys, and kids like to play outside. Again, they don't wash their hands. When this kid doesn't wash their hands and it comes in and they decide to ingest food or water without washing their hands, that fecal material that might be underneath their fingernails might also get into their body, and that could lead to the spreading of hookworm eggs or roundworm eggs into the child's body. And so once those eggs or organisms are spread down into the kid's body, those parasites can still start to fester. And when they fester, that can cause a lot of problems for the child and make the child very sick and very weak. So this is a key example of zoonotic transmission, where this child is going to acquire a parasite essentially from playing outside because the kid didn't practice very good hand hygiene when he was younger. So that's just one example of zoonotic disease transmission. Going back to more epidemiological terms, we have period prevalence and point prevalence, as well as mortality rate. In